All right, guys, I'm here with Andrew Gould. Andrew, thank you so much for coming on the podcast.
Thanks for having me.
How are you?
Good. Doing very well. How about you?
I'm doing pretty well as well. What have you been up to? Playing a lot?
Yeah, been in New York most of the time, playing freelancing. I was actually in Boston this past weekend playing at the Berkeley Performance Center with this band called the 8-Bit Big Band, where we play like a bunch of like like big band video game arrangements of like video game music. But yeah, and besides that, I've been in town most of the time recording and doing different freelance gigs.
Awesome. Yeah. Can you tell me a little bit about the 8-Bit Big Band? Like who's the leader of that?
It's this bass player named Charlie Rosen, who is the leader. And he works a lot. I mean, he does a lot of various kinds of things in the city. He works a lot on Broadway and kind of like orchestrates and arranges for a lot of Broadway musicals, and puts together a lot of other shows and productions around the city and does a lot of different arrangements and orchestrations for other bands too. And he has two main projects that are kind of outside of his Broadway thing. One is the Broadway Big Band, where it's kind of self-explanatory. We play a bunch of Broadway music, big band arrangements, and then the 8-Bit Big Band, which is more of a new thing and it's really been kind of getting a lot of steam on Instagram because he's been posting a lot of videos of us all in the studio playing a lot of these charts.
What's it like to play video game music?
It's pretty awesome. It's different. It's definitely like a trip down memory lane, because a lot of the music is from games that I played when I was a kid, like Sega Genesis and Nintendo 64 and like all these games, and so it's like I'm almost like trying not to laugh half the time playing because I'm just like remembering playing these video games when I was a kid. But his arrangements are crazy and they're like super complex and like really hard to pull off, but amazing. Like when we do pull it off, it's incredible. It's just a lot of notes and a lot of really hard stuff and metric and like key like modulations all the time. So yeah.
Does that band have a record out?
They have two albums. Both are not released physical copies. They're just online. So yeah, two digital releases.
Gotcha. Right on. So are you originally from the New York area?
I am. I'm from Long Island.
Gotcha. And just tell us a little bit about your family. Like, were your parents musical? Were any of your siblings musical, or were you kind of the odd one out?
Yeah, so I guess I'm the odd one out. I'm an only child. Neither of my parents were musicians. So I grew up pretty much in a not particularly musical household. I mean, my parents listened to some music. Like my mom had like Red Hot Chili Peppers records and like Nirvana and Stone Temple Pilots and stuff like that, which I always loved. But that wasn't really what actually got me into music. I think I got into music actually just through my school music program. I was really lucky. I went to a school district, East Meadow School District, which had like an especially good music program for Long Island. And a lot of the teachers that taught there worked on Broadway, subbed on Broadway, played a lot of gigs in the city, and a lot of freelance gigs on Long Island. And so they were really knowledgeable. And so they were always like super supportive whenever I had a question. Like they would always answer to like the nth degree. There was a big music office that had all these like music books in it. And it ended up being that like whenever I had an off period or on my lunch break, I would just end up in the band room practicing and like getting one of these books from the office and pulling it out and trying to read music, just sight reading. It didn't matter. It could be like a cello etudes book or a flute book. And I would just read it on my saxophone and just check out what it had. So, and then ask my teachers questions about it, like on my off periods. So that's kind of like what my initial start to getting into music was, just through my school.
Was saxophone your first instrument?
I did play cello for a second in fourth grade, but I hated it. I think it was just because, as a fourth grader, the cello's like almost the same size as you. And I just hated carrying around this giant wooden instrument. It was like this smelly rental instrument too. So like, yeah, I just didn't like anything about it, which is too bad because now I think the cello is like an amazingly beautiful instrument, but I wasn't ready to appreciate anything about it when I was that age.
Yeah, I think that's fair. And so you start playing the saxophone, and I would assume it's mostly classical for the first few years, right?
Yeah. It was all just playing in like like school wind ensemble and like symphonic concert band kind of stuff.
Yeah, so where did the interest in jazz originate? Were your parents into it, or was it kind of something you discovered on your own?
It was something that I discovered because, all right, so basically I started saxophone a year late because I did cello fourth grade, saxophone fifth grade, and I was the last chair. They put me in the very last chair, like the very last saxophone. The band director got really frustrated with the person that was playing lead. I don't remember why at all, but just to prove a point, he was like, "All right, lead player, go sit in the back, and Andrew, you who's sitting in the very last seat, you go play first." So all of a sudden, like I just got put in the hot seat and I wanted to rise to the occasion. So I tried to, and I told my parents, and I ended up getting some private lessons. And one of my first private teachers gave me a recording, and on one side it was Cannibal Adderley Something Else. It was a cassette tape, so it had two sides. You could put a record on each side. So Cannibal Adderley Something Else was on one side, and David Sanborn up front was on the other side. And I heard those two very different but both awesome approaches to playing the alto saxophone. And I just I had to play like that. Like I needed to be able to do that. I thought it was the coolest thing in the world. And basically that's like what kind of got me into jazz and got me into playing saxophone in that sort of style.
Was that like middle school, like seventh grade, sixth grade?
Yeah, it was probably like sixth or seventh grade. Yeah.
Right on. And so you kind of become interested in jazz, and you probably start practicing a little bit more, and then did your kind of interest just grow from there on? When did you start kind of considering music to be a career path, or at least take it seriously?
I never really thought about it being a career path until 11th grade because, around then you're starting to think about what colleges you want to go to as a high school kid. And I remember asking my parents, like, oh, I need to major in something. Like, what should I pick as my major? And they're like, well, it should be something that you like doing, that you enjoy doing, that you think you could see yourself doing as a profession for the rest of your life. I'm like, holy crap, this is a pretty major decision. And it was clear, like right then, I was like, well, okay, that's playing the saxophone, that's being a musician, like no question. There's nothing else I could picture myself doing. And so from then on, I was like, I guess that means I need to like stop just kind of like messing around. Like I really need to work super hard at this. This needs to be like my thing. And so from like 11th grade and on is when I really started working ultra hard. I was always into it and I was kind of practiced and listened to music, but then like from that point on, I really worked hard at it.
Were you playing gigs by then?
No, I wasn't playing any gigs. I mean, I was just playing school concerts and practicing in my basement. It wasn't until I think maybe 12th grade or my first year of college where I started actually playing some gigs out on Long Island and, like subbing in big bands. There was one big band on Long Island, the Leon Petruzzi Jazz Orchestra, and it was full of a lot of the music educators at the time. And if you were like interested as a high school kid, you can go there and like one of the guys in the saxophone section will be like, hey, kid, come over here. You come sit in for a couple tunes. And so I would do that. But that was pretty much the closest thing to like a real gig that I had until I was in college.
Right. Do you remember your first paid gig?
Yes, I do. It was with another big band called the Al Miller Big Band, and it was at some church. I think it was a church. It might even have been a synagogue. I can't remember. But it was like some community concert, like an indoor community concert at like a music room in like a local church or synagogue. And I was super nervous. And I was playing second alto. And the lead alto player was this guy, Chasey Dean, who was he was like 80 something at the time. He was best friends with Phil Woods. And so he would always tell me stories about Phil Woods and stuff. And yeah, that was the first concert I ever did.
Nice. Where did you do your undergrad?
I studied jazz studies at SUNY Purchase College for my undergrad. Yeah.
How do you like it there?
I actually really loved it. Actually, I should say that I did my first year of college at Hofstra University because I was considering being a music ed major. And then kind of just being at Hofstra for a year, being surrounded by music ed majors, I really just needed to be doing a performance program and be surrounded by people that like wanted to really be players. And so like I liked a lot of things about Hofstra, but it wasn't really the environment to be like a music performer. So then I transferred to Purchase, They Purchase accepted none of my freshman credits from Hofstra, so I ended up being a freshman again at Purchase. Did a 5-year undergrad. Yeah, but I
Who did
really,
you? Yeah, go ahead.
yeah, I like Purchase a lot. When I got there, I finally found myself with like a group of kids that were like all trying to practice and call sessions and learn tunes and write music, and that's when I felt like, okay, like I'm in my element here, you know.
Yeah, definitely. And I think people like to talk a lot about the negatives of college in terms of like debt and whatever else and the environment. But the one important thing to note for people about it is it's one of the only places where you can just be surrounded by people that are interested in the same thing that are the same age as you. And
Yeah,
so that I think is really invaluable. And I'm sure you can attest to how motivating that was.
it was huge. I mean, honestly, that it was enormously huge for me. I mean, just being around people that were in my exact same boat that just wanted to play, that were down to meet up. Like, yo, let's meet at the conservatory at 10 p.m. and just play tunes. It could be like half the time it was just like a duo with the bass player or a duo with the drummer. It didn't even matter. Like we would just play tunes until we got kicked out of the music building at like 2 a.m., you know?
Right.
And if I had nobody to play with, then I was just in the practice room, you know? And that's how I met like who's now like my best friend, Sam Dillon. He just like knocked on my door, like in like one of the very first days we were at Purchase. And he's like, yo, dude, what are you practicing? We got to hang out, you know? And then that was like the beginning of a beautiful friendship.
Yeah,
Yeah,
Sam's a great guy. He's coming on next week, and so that'll be fun to talk to him as well.
yeah, absolutely.
So who were you studying with at the time?
I studied with a few people at Purchase. The first teacher was Javon Jackson. Then I studied a few years with Steve Wilson, and then with Jimmy Green. And also, one of my years I alternated studying a little bit with John Riley on the drums, and I would play duo with him in a lot of lessons too. So I had a bunch of different teachers there.
Can you say a little bit just about each one of their kind of teaching styles and how that kind of connected with you?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, Javon, I had as a freshman, and he was pretty loose. Like he wasn't very regimented as far as what he had me working on. Um, he really liked it when I was just transcribing solos. He would always just assign me a solo to transcribe, and I would come in either with it memorized or partially memorized or written out, and just play it for him. And we would talk about it, and he would be like, "Hey, yeah, so what do you think's going on in this bar?" You know, and it was pretty loose, but we just kind of talked about music together, you know, and played. Sometimes whatever tune I transcribed, we'd be like, all right, cool. Did you learn this tune? Let's play this duo for a second, you know? And then it was very, very loose. It was really just transcribe this, you know, let's hear you play it. All right. This is what sounds messed up to me. Fix this, you know? With Steve Wilson, he had me he tried to stretch my harmonic thing a little bit more. Like we worked on a lot of tunes. He didn't play so much saxophone with me. He played more piano. Um, and he would bring in like a lead sheet for like a Wayne Shorter tune or a Herbie tune or something like that. And we would kind of talk about how to approach the chord changes, which weren't always just functional harmony. There would be, you know, different kinds of, you know, slash chords sometimes or non-related chords, you know. And so we would get into, you know, how to connect from one chord to the next on those kinds of tunes. So with him, it was a little bit more harmony based. Jimmy Green was super regimented. He analyzed everything that he thought was weak in my playing and came up and took my notebook for me and wrote down how he thought I could practice and what he thought I could get better at. Had me working on comping for the tunes that I was learning on piano, and practicing with the metronome, being able to solo with a metronome by myself and outline every bit of the harmony, so that way my playing was clear, like harmonically and also time-wise. Yeah, John Riley, we really just kind of played duo, and he talked to me about what he felt he liked in my playing, things that I could get better at. Gave me a couple of rhythmic ideas to kind of try to integrate into the playing a little bit. So yeah, every one of them kind of had their own thing, but it all kind of really contributed a lot to like me developing, you know, an approach and an outlook for, okay, like I want to take this, I want to incorporate this in my own playing, you know?
Yeah, that's definitely the way to do it. Is just take your favorite things or your favorite components of the way that someone teaches or their kind of approach, and then incorporate that into your own thing. And so I think that is invaluable to be able to have a large number of different perspectives on what you should be focusing on, and various aspects of critiquing your playing, and all that sort of thing. So that's great. I think that's huge.
Yeah, it really was, and I should actually also mention that, just because Steve Wilson, he was the guy that I kind of spent most of my time at Purchase with, but he was such a busy guy, he still is, that like John Gordon subbed for a lot of my lessons too,
Hmm.
like almost 50% of the time. And it was very interesting because John used to call me out on completely different things than Steve would, and John was really the guy that got me to fix my embouchure and to kind of get a better sound concept happening, like really, I was playing like a really open setup with a really hard reed at the time, and it was just struggling to make it work. So I remember him telling me, like, you need to play a Meyer 6, a medium reed, and figure out how to make that sound good. And when you can do that, and you're doing everything right with your embouchure and your airstream, then you can go on and play a different setup if you want. But right now, you're not ready for that. So he was kind of like really like a hard ass on me as far as that was concerned. But it ended up like helping me in a huge way. So yeah, I should also mention that he was one of my teachers that had a big impact.
Yeah, well, he's a great person to be a hard ass about sound, considering his sound is so incredible.
Oh man, it's amazing. Still one of my absolute favorite Alto sounds. Like, yeah, he's one of my idols, man. For real. John is
Yeah.
amazing.
Yeah, me too. And I remember him telling me the same thing. I took a couple lessons with him, and the way that he put it was just like, if you are using anything harder than a 2.5, you're probably working too hard. And I think that there's some truth to that, And in his view, you can get anything that you need to get out of your sound with something like a 2.5 or a 3, something that's not ridiculously hard. So I think that helped me a lot.
Yep. He said the same thing to me too. I think he refined his approach even more. He went down to half strength because he used to tell me a 3, but I remember he went down to 2.5 at one point too. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's funny. Yeah, he was all about the Joe Lard approach and all that whole approach to embouchure and air and everything like that, which was like so helpful, incredibly helpful to me. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. So you're at Purchase. Are you making it down to the city frequently to check out stuff or play sessions?
Yeah, we went all the time into the city. I used to go into the city like several times a week, or as much as I could. I mean, I didn't have a car for a lot of the time, so I was trying to bum rides from my friends. But yeah, we would go check out. We would always check out the websites of all the venues and see who was playing and go hear music. I was going to the Village Vanguard on Monday nights like as much as I possibly could because that
Hmm.
was my favorite thing. I wanted to hear Dick Oates play live as much as I possibly could. And then yeah, just check out all my other favorite musicians, you know, and be down there. I didn't start really sitting in like for jam sessions in the city until I was kind of like a senior at Purchase, or even when I was starting to do my master's when I was actually in the city. But it was more just checking out shows in my undergrad.
Gotcha. So you're at Purchase, you're going to class, playing sessions at Purchase, I'm sure all the time, and then also going out of the city and getting all these different opinions from all these teachers. So just working on your craft, I guess. And so once you graduate from Purchase, how do you decide, or how did you decide what your next step was going to be? Because you ended up going to grad school, correct?
Yeah, I did. I went right to Manhattan School of Music after Purchase too.
Yeah. What was the impetus for you to go to Manhattan School as opposed to any other place? Was it mostly
Um,
the location, or was it the teacher, or?
Yeah, it was a combination of location and teacher. I either wanted to stay at Purchase or go to Manhattan School. But I was at Purchase for 4 years, and as much as I loved studying there, I just thought, maybe it'd be cool to just get a different perspective. Be nice to actually be going to school in the city. MSM, especially at the time, was like really well known. Had like a lot of, there was always like the best, some of the best young jazz players went there. I knew like some of my favorite Alto players went there. Will Vincent, Miguel Zanon, many others too. Um, so I was like, yeah, let me see what happens there. There was a great saxophone faculty, which actually ended up changing right before I went there. I didn't know it, but like Oates had just left, Bob Mintzer had just left. I thought maybe I'd get to study with one of those guys. But it ended up that Garzone was on the faculty when I got in there, so I ended up hanging with Garzone. But yeah, it was mostly location and the fact that they had really good faculty.
Yeah, I actually didn't know that Garzone taught there.
Yeah, he I got lucky and kind of caught him in the interim because it was right before he got his full-time job at Berkeley, and he ended up teaching at MSM for 2 years. The 2 years I did my master's there, so he was my teacher for both those years.
Gotcha. And just on a saxophone specific note, I have to ask,
Yeah.
how did he contrast with John Gordon? Because Garzone is known for having just like a ridiculously wide tip opening and like a 4 or a 5 reed. So did that ever come up?
Oh yeah, it definitely did. I mean, I think thankfully because I was studying with him on alto, he didn't like make me. He wasn't like trying to be like, on Andrew, you need to play a 10 opening and a 5 reed. He definitely did ask me about my setup. He's like, and you should probably throw on like an 8 or 9 on there, like a 4 reed or something like that. And I was like, man, I don't know, George. That's pretty intense. Like, I'm pretty happy with the setup I have right now. He's like, all right, but you should check that. I'd be curious to hear you on that, but he was always like, no, but what you have like setup wise is working for you. So kind of, don't fix it if it ain't broke. So he never really busted my balls too much on setup. I think if I was a tenor player, he might have forced me to a little more. But no, he's a really chill guy. He's the man. I love George. But I think the alto thing kind of helped me maybe stay away from the really, really wide setup thing that I know that he likes.
Right. Gotcha. What were you guys working on? How would you describe his approach? Was it a lot of playing tunes? Was he trying to, get you on the chromatic triads and all of that?
Yeah, he definitely, it was both those things. I mean, I think my first year, he was just trying to get me, he was just working on my time feel and just working on playing tunes by myself, and just kind of getting me to chill out because I was so worried about nailing every single chord change and playing every chord change on every tune, just kind of instilling this thing like where everybody could hear like wherever I am in the tune at any time, like every extension on every harmony, like the voice leading had to be absolutely 100% perfect, and I think that's a really good way to practice for sure. But George was like, he heard me, he was like, all right, bro, you need to chill out, just relax, just let the melodies flow, so he kind of like just got me to actually play less notes, relax my time feel a little bit, play a little bit more melodies and phrases versus just like playing licks over chords. That was like for several months to maybe even a year. And then we started really talking more about the triadic chromatic approach, and just getting me to implement that while doing all the other stuff, while just playing phrases and, connecting my phrases with the triadic chromatic approach, still landing on good melodies and still doing that whole thing. So yeah, he was awesome. He was one of my favorite teachers I've ever had. He helped me chill out so much, just hearing him talk about life even chilled me out.
Yeah, whenever I listen to him talk, he just always kind of comes off to me as like a saxophone monk. Like I remember like seeing one interview with him and he was explaining how he wakes up every day at like 4 to practice for 2 hours and then he gets on with his day. And
Oh yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
I guess people are always wondering how he does it, and that's just kind of his meditation, So it seems like he'd be a great person to study with for sure, and to have a more relaxed perspective. But he's
Yeah.
kind of a contradiction too, because on the one hand he's a very chill guy, he's very very relaxed, but then if he's playing, he can absolutely bring out the dragon, as it were.
He definitely can. But it's funny because whenever he does, he's still relaxed. He's still in full control and he's still 100% conscious of what he's doing, Just because he's unleashing the beast like doesn't mean he's not like relaxed while he's doing it, And
Yeah.
that actually makes it mean more because it just shows you how in full control he is over like the whole range of everything. Yeah, he's incredible. He's such a badass.
Yeah, man, without a doubt. So you finished at Manhattan School, and what is the next thing for you? Do you move right into the city, or do you do something else in the meantime, or how does that look for you?
Yeah, I pretty much stayed in the city. I had a couple of different like small part-time jobs, like working at music stores and stuff like that. And I wasn't playing that much. I was playing maybe a gig or two a week and starting to sub on some things, And I had a couple of good gigs every now and then, but it really took a while to get the ball rolling. As far as I was just going to a lot of people's shows, going to a lot of jam sessions, meeting people, playing gigs sometimes with whoever I had known from Purchase or MSM that were putting together their own bands with original music. And, it was, I think it's kind of the thing that happens to most kids when they either move to New York or graduate from school in New York, where there's just like a grace period where you have to kind of actually get on the scene, be heard, sub on a few things and be seen around, before like your career can really start happening at all,
Right.
Because you're just playing like a random big band gig once a week, and it's good because you meet a lot of people, but you're not even coming close to making a living or paying your rent, so yeah, I had to supplement it at first with with a couple of music jobs and a little bit of private teaching, and as the years went on, it just got better and better, and I just try to keep track of it, like, all right, is this year better than last year? Am I playing more gigs? Am I finding myself in musical situations that I want to be involved with more? Yes, great, okay, cool. So things are moving in the right direction, and that was just enough to keep me at it.
Yeah, definitely. And so at this point, do you kind of are you happy with the balance of? Because I always think about the balance of music that you like to play versus music that people will pay you, to play. And so it seems to be, just as you were saying, that the balance gets better as time goes on, with any luck. And so how do you feel about the balance for you now? Are you pretty much playing all music that you want to? Would you like to change how that looks for you? How does it? How do you feel about it?
Yeah, I mean, I'm like 100% happy with what I'm doing now, and I'm really grateful for all the opportunities that I have. I do wish I would be doing a couple of different things. Like I would like to play more small group gigs, like more small group jazz gigs, and even do more like non-jazz recording stuff. Because I do like a decent amount of hip hop and R&B and like funk recording sessions and stuff like that, and like I absolutely love that music, and I wish I was just doing even more of it. It's just like the most fun thing in the world for me. But yeah, I do like a kind of just a big mix of everything, and I like that. I like the idea of being, as versatile as I can be, and like learning about a lot of different kinds of styles of music and applying them all, to different situations. I feel like studying groove music helps my jazz playing and vice versa, So like I kind of like having that. I like the versatility thing.
Yeah, definitely. What would be your biggest advice for someone who is trying to, for lack of a better word, do what you're doing?
Um, I think you need to just check out as much music as you possibly can. Just be listening to different stuff. Go check out different kinds of music. You know, Meet people, talk to people, ask people to play. Um, study, study the music, transcribe tunes, transcribe solos of whatever you like. It could be of the rhythms that like Q-Tip is rapping. Transcribe his rhythms. Or transcribe a singer. Just listen to different kinds of music. Because the fact is it's like it's 2019. Like it's hard to make music just being a bebop saxophone player. As awesome as that would be, and there's still some people that do it. Like there's just other stuff that I happen to like, and I think most other people would probably fall in that category too. So you need to keep your ears open to as much different kinds of music, as many different kinds of music as you can. So if you find yourself in that situation, you don't fall flat on your face. You have a frame of reference. That's really what it's about, is having a frame of reference for all these different kinds of styles. You know, yeah, keep your eyes and ears open, and just hang out and check out different stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's highly wise of you to say. And I've noticed that point of just about versatility, being open-minded, all of those sort of things, I see them over and over and over again when I ask people that question. And so generally speaking, if you are getting more or less the same answer to a question then from a larger number of people, then most likely that's close to the right answer. So
For sure.
yeah, so I think that's a great point, and something that should definitely not be overlooked. And so one of the things that I had a few people request that I ask you about is just lead playing, because you play obviously in a lot of big band settings, whether that's Stephen Feifke's band, the
Mhm.
8-Bit Big Band, or any number of other big bands that you play in. And so can you just talk a little bit about how you think about lead playing and playing in a section, and just the main things that you think about when you're trying to make that work as best as possible.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, I love playing lead alto, and it's one of the things I find myself doing the most, and it's definitely one of the things that I care about like the most musically. So first, I mean, kind of going along with what I just said is like, yeah, I developed my frame of reference for that from listening to all the different big bands, all the classic stuff, Duke Ellington, Count Basie, specifically those two. Thad Jones Mel Lewis Big Band is probably my personal favorite, just stylistically speaking. And then obviously the extension of that is the Vanguard bands. Also Tito Puente and Michito and Tito Rodriguez and all that kind of stuff. Like for me, like two of the modern influences that I feel like I try to model myself after are Dick Oates and also Bobby Porcelli. Those two guys are just like so iconic, the way that they play lead. It's so strong and so clear, and just it's just beautiful. Like they have beautiful sounds, the way that they phrase. So I checked out those guys so much, like listen to them every day. But also like I think when I'm actually playing lead, like I'm really thinking about what my role is in the music, whether I have the melody, if I'm the top voice of the harmony, what the function of my part is playing. Am I a background? Am I a counter line? Am I under another instrument? Am I playing unison with somebody else? Because I feel like it's a big thing. It's just about the blend. And there's a certain sound and a certain way that you can shape your sound as a saxophone player, where it lends your sound to being able to blend with somebody else. And there's another way you can shape it, just with your airstream and how you think about your sound, where you can bring it out and be more in the lead. And so even as a lead player, I'm always trying to be aware of whether if I actually have the lead or not. Just because I'm sitting out the one doesn't mean I'm blasting triple forte all the time and playing really loud. It's all about dynamic contrast. And so if I hear that I have unison with trombone one and trumpet one, I'm going to back way off. I'm going to let them carry the sound more. And I'm going to play softer. I'm going to be trying to be as in tune with them as I can, phrase with them. But when I have the lead, I'm going to try to play, obviously, I'm going to try to sing it. I'm hearing if I have, when it breaks into harmony, I'm going to be playing with vibrato, depending on the style. Different things like this, just being like really aware of what my function is in the band at all times, Also, I think, as a lead player, you do have to be able to belt it and really bring it when the time is appropriate, and then also really know how to back off and play really soft. There's like a ballad and there's a piano solo. You need to come way down, like even softer than you think. However soft you're playing, you need to be at least a dynamic less than that. And when the saxophones are in unison, and it's marked forte, it's not really forte. It's more like mezzo piano, because all 5 saxophones in unison is going to be loud, So like all these little things like that, like just being like hyper aware of what's happening at all times.
Yeah, and I think that that's a very important point as well, which is that dynamics are relative. There's no set decibel level of a forte. It's all relative depending on what section you're playing in and what the piece requires, and all sorts of different factors. So I think that that's crucial.
Even the room you're playing in, you might just be in a really loud room, or maybe there's the piano, the mic on the piano isn't working so well, or whatever. There's so many different factors,
Yeah, so just going along with that, I have to ask you about playing with the Vanguard band, because you've had a chance to play with them, a fair bit, and so it's just fascinating to me how such a progression can happen, because you mentioned, when you were in college, going to see them, as much as you possibly could, and so now this is like between 5 and 10 years later, and you get the opportunity to play with them. So can you tell me what that development for you feels like, and what it's like to play with that band?
Yeah, oh man, I mean that's one of the biggest honors musically that I've personally had. I mean, that band, like I told you, like that band is just such a huge musical influence for me. Like the music of Thad Jones and Brookmeyer and McNeely, and the way those guys all play it, it's just like the coolest thing in the whole world. Yeah, I was ultra nervous the first time I got called to sub in with them. But I just, I tried to kind of remind myself of these things that I was even saying to you, and I was playing second alto, so I wasn't really in the hot seat in the same way that I felt like I would have been if I was necessarily on lead. But I'm just thinking about blending as much as I can and, phrasing with everybody else and not falling in any holes. Um, but yeah, it was a huge honor. I mean, the sense of time and of phrasing that those guys have as a band and as a unit is just a special thing. I haven't felt quite that way sitting in with any other band in New York. That's not to say that other bands are worse. It's just a different sense of time and phrasing, I think. And that's what's going to happen when you get generally a band that's been together for that long, of all these really killing musicians that play together for that much. They're going to develop their own vibe on it. So fitting into that was just really fun, just like the most fun, and also kind of like reassuring, like, yeah, okay, like this is more or less how I'm hearing it too. Like it just feels good to finally be like, yeah, okay, this is that band. I've heard this exact sound on those records. I've shed it to this exact feel before. Here it is, and to do it live is like the coolest thing.
Yeah, I think it's super inspiring to see that kind of progression from, going as a, 19 or 20-year-old or whatever the case is, and going to see them and then, relentlessly pursuing that goal of playing and doing all these things they're doing, and then finally getting to play with that band that you got to or that you love to go see when you were way younger. So I think that's super inspiring, and I've seen it, quite a bit, and it just goes to show that if you have a goal in mind, not that playing in the Vanguard band was like your ultimate goal, but it was probably, in your mind at least, right?
Oh yeah, it was definitely it was definitely one of them. That's for sure. I mean, it's something I always wanted to do. So yeah, it's definitely a
Yeah.
next goal.
Yeah, it just goes to show that if you pursue a goal relentlessly, then it's achievable. So I think that is an awesome story, and I appreciate you sharing that with us.
Yeah, of course, of course.
Yeah. So tell me a little bit about what your practicing looks like at this point. Is it mostly working on other people's music because you're very in demand, sideman in the big band settings and in small group settings, like you're playing with Nuf Said, which is
Mhm.
a great group as well, although not necessarily like in the very much different from like the Vanguard band.
Oh, sure, yeah, completely.
Yeah. So what does your practicing look like?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of it is looking at other people's music and making sure that I'm, just kind of prepared for what's coming that week. It's almost like a week to week and day to day basis a lot of times, just because, the hustle is real right now, as they say. It's like just running around New York and doing all these different rehearsals and being on top of everything, and especially lately, like I feel like I'm just like regurgitating so much different music all the time. And one day it's a recording session, a rehearsal, and a big band gig. The next day it's like a small group jazz gig, and day after that it's like a thing where I'm like playing mostly flute and soprano, and like not as much alto, or whatever. It always varies. So yeah, it's looking at a lot of people's music, and then also like a lot of survival practice, I call it, where I'm just like picking up alto and playing like long tones and some scale exercises a little bit just to feel warm on the instrument, and then maybe do the same on soprano, do the same on flute, or on tenor. Like I have a tenor gig this weekend at Birdland on Sunday, and so like I'm trying to play a little bit more tenor, so I just feel like I'm somewhat inside the sound because I don't really play that much tenor. And then especially for like flute, because flute's such a demanding instrument as far as like your embouchure is concerned, and staying in shape. And if you take a day off, which I unfortunately don't have a choice sometimes to do, you really feel it. you know so it's a lot of survival practice. I've also been getting into the iwi a lot. I got an iwi finally, which is really really fun. And it kind of enables me to at least shed something at night, because I can just put
Yes,
some headphones in
that's
and play
huge.
some, like even just like playing tunes in all 12 keys is really good, because it just gets my brain active. Maybe when I couldn't necessarily, or didn't have the time to do that during the day, I could just like play a couple of tunes in all 12 keys like at 3 a.m. on my iwi and feel like I like got that kind of a mental workout happening that day. It's been a minute since I've transcribed or like really practiced anything kind of like that, and I miss it. So I'm hoping that maybe some more time opens up soon where I can kind of get into that sort of a shedding routine more.
Yeah, definitely. But just even fundamentals, man, vital for keeping everything well oiled. You know.
Exactly, exactly. And so if I have a half hour or an hour, like that's what I'm gonna hit, you know. And the thing is like, you know, when I was in school, I practiced all day, every day. I couldn't even tell you how many hours. It was just like from the morning to when the music building closed. I was just living and breathing music, you know. And I feel like these days I'm leaning on that kind of time more because I don't have it anymore. So like I covered a lot of that